Narcissist. Married. 6 months later, it's divorce. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. I'm going to provide you with another case study to help you see various aspects of the narcissistic dynamic in action and highlight them for you, as the individual that writes about her experiences does not appear to understand that her husband is a narcissist. The relationship with the narcissist is one where, if you become the intimate partner primary source, you're sucked in and invariably love-bombed. That love-bombing particularly takes place where you get the golden period. Some people get the bronze period, whereby they don't get all of the flash stuff. In essence, the dark side of the narcissist is kept at bay, and that's as good as it gets for you. But for many people, they experience what is known as the golden period. They meet someone who seems absolutely wonderful, kind, exciting, desirable, sexy, that they like similar things to you, they dislike similar things to you, they want to spend all of their time with you. My videos have identified the many classic traits in that regard, along with my book, Red Flag, which shows you 50 signs of narcissistic seduction. The golden period is given to draw you in through the seduction phase and then embed you as the intimate partner primary source. Thus, you are the individual that is easiest to control, provides the most fuel, the best character traits, and residual benefits. Hence, you become the intimate partner prime source. The golden period typically lasts between 6 to 18 months, can be shorter, can be longer. And then you enter the sustained devaluation. Sometimes you get the stranger zone at the beginning of the sustained devaluation, but not always, where you're not really being treated badly, but all of the good stuff just evaporates overnight, and you're wondering, who is this person that sat opposite you at the breakfast table? In some instances, the narcissist can shift to devaluation very quickly within what might have been seen as an event which solidified the relationship. So, for example, there are instances of people who find themselves being devalued within months, even weeks of when they got married, that they would expect to be enjoying a honeymoon period and suddenly find that the relationship has turned very sour. Often, such individuals reach an erroneous conclusion by thinking, oh, the individual, everything was going well when we lived together, but now that we're married, that makes it a much firmer commitment, and they must be completely frightened of that commitment, and that's why it's gone wrong. If we had just stayed living together, then everything would be all right. That is an erroneous conclusion. There are some instances that I have dealt with where people have even been devalued on their wedding night. Essentially, you're now under control once you're married, and this may well coincide with the fact that whilst you have been easily controlled, your fuel has become stale, or you're not providing it as often as enough, because you now feel that, well, I don't need to make as much as an effort because we're now married. It's not that you love the person any less, but you take your foot off the gas a little bit as a consequence of feeling more secure, that you feel that it's moved to something deeper, that you've shown the ultimate commitment by becoming married. And thus that triggers your devaluation. Many people fail to recognize that such a swift move from marriage to then devaluation, those unpleasant behaviors, is the hallmark of the narcissist. And in this case study, an individual found herself where her husband demanded a divorce just 6 months after becoming married, and she didn't have a clue as to why it was occurring. It appeared in the Daily Mail and is written by Eve Simmons. It's her words, and I will be, of course, providing you with my analysis as I work my way through it for you. A picture of a pair of earrings was what started it all. Red studs shaped like miniature chili peppers on his iPhone. It was the final day of our 10-day trip to Mexico, 6 months after our fairy tale wedding. I'd suggested we swapped phones to see each other's photos of our holiday. "Why do you have a picture of earrings?" I asked. Challenge fuel. To which my partner of 9 years replied, "Oh, a friend from work has the same ones. I took a picture to send to her." The next day, I called my best friend and told her about the chili pepper earrings. Did I have anything to worry about? "If this was anyone else's partner, I'd be worried. But this is your husband," she said. She was right. My partner was born to be a husband. He was the type of man who would spend all day perfecting my favourite pasta dish and have it ready the moment I came through the door from work. He gave up his evenings to teach me how to play tennis and built me my very own walk-in wardrobe. All of those, of course, are benign behaviours to bring her under control. In May 2022, he sobbed throughout our wedding ceremony, telling me he wished I saw myself as he saw me. Beautiful, smart, and caring. Assertion of control through flattery. We were planning a loft conversion on the house we owned together and had stopped using contraception. He was in it for the long run. And yet, less than a fortnight after we returned from Mexico, he announced that he wasn't sure he wanted to be married to me. "Things have been a bit rubbish between us recently," he said one Thursday evening. This came as news to me. This is demonstrative of the way that two people can see the same relationship completely differently. The victim sees it through their lens, their own perspective, whereby there isn't a problem. The narcissist sees it through their perspective, whereby what once was good has now soured because the individual has been painted black. I thought of the earrings and responded, "You're going to call me crazy, but is there someone else?" He stayed silent. No denial. I could feel my legs shaking. I was dizzy and lightheaded. His silent treatment, of course, being a present silent treatment, was done to nullify the threat to control posed by her question. My heart was thumping so hard, I was afraid it would explode out of my ribcage. I ran to the toilet and vomited. "I'm really sorry. Nothing has happened," he assured me. False contrition. For a good 15 seconds, I convinced myself this was a hyper-realistic nightmare. It was the only way this situation could be feasible. I thought of our wedding and the series of phone calls from family and friends afterwards, telling us it was the most beautiful, heartfelt ceremony they'd ever witnessed. I thought of the caption on his Instagram post of our wedding pictures. "Best day of my life," he wrote. Use of social media, triangulation. Half an hour ago, my future was certain. My husband, dog, house in the suburbs, and hopefully 2 children. Now, I was at risk of losing everything. "But we're married," I said. Silence. I asked if it was the friend from work with the chili pepper earrings. Again, no answer, and then a sheepish nod. After a while, he mumbled that he'd recently been plagued by thoughts about how dull our life was, viewed through the lens of black. He assured me again that nothing had happened with her, most likely a lie, but the situation had left him asking himself, "Is that it?" "Yes, it's called marriage," I replied. And marital domesticity wasn't exactly a gear shift for our relationship. By the time that he proposed in 2019, we'd been living together for almost 4 years and owned a flat. Our combined creative energies went into making our 2-bedroom box a home. Indeed, we both loved it so much that when asking me for my hand in marriage, he got down on one knee beside my dressing table during my evening skincare routine. "We love our home together, so we're better to ask you than here," he had said, triangulation with object. We loved nothing more than putting together over-the-top dinner parties for anyone who was interested and bulk buying cleaning products. Mirroring. And it wasn't just our life together. We had an emotional connection that I'd always believed would stand the test of time. Clearly they didn't. She had been duped into believing this to be the case. He'd supported me through the eating disorder I suffered in my 20s, false compassion. I often felt we were a hive mind, sharing the same attitudes on most hot-button issues, namely our friend's choice of romantic partner, mirroring. We spent Sunday afternoons happily nattering away while out walking or cuddled up on the sofa. Had he been living a lie? After an hour of crying, he apologised, false contrition. He was confused. He wanted us to do therapy, triangulation, but he loved me and he wanted to be my husband. We hugged, I cried a bit more, and that night lay awake staring at the light fixture. The following evening, I walked in from work to find him propped up against the kitchen counter beside half a bottle of red wine. "I've been thinking about our relationship and," he started before I'd even shut the door, sense of entitlement, monologue. This was a very different man to the one that I married. He was bolshy and arrogant. He proceeded to dissect our relationship as he saw it. The times I'd wronged him, bringing up the past, denied him attention, threat to control, my unrelenting obsession with work, threat to control, the spark we'd lost, threat to control. He decided he didn't want to try and make a go of it. For him, it was over. I asked if he was really prepared to throw our life away, gesturing to the chic living room we'd furnished together. "Eve, we can't stay together because of stuff," he said, dismissiveness. It was the start of a 6-month path of separation and eventually divorce that I never imagined would happen to me. But in the months since my surprise break-up, I've learnt my situation isn't as rare as I'd thought. Although the average length of marriage before a divorce is around 8 years, divorce lawyers say the period of matrimony they see is getting shorter. Sandra Davis, a partner at Mishcon de Rea, specialising in family law, has noticed a connected trend. I've seen a lot of couples who live together for many, many years. Everyone thinks they're totally solid, but when they get married, and suddenly it ends. Why? For some, the reality of permanency is terrifying, she says. Notice how this lawyer believes that that is what drives people. Now, it could be in some instances, but more usually it will be linked to something else which has destroyed the marriage, namely the fact that by this juncture, the fact that the individual has come under such control by marriage and the other factors that I mentioned earlier result in the fact that she or he enters devaluation and then disengages. With others, perhaps the relationship is already fragmenting, but the couple get caught up in the fairy tale of the wedding planning. When real life starts again, the cracks are still there. Now, of course, the attention that comes with planning for a wedding may well serve as a distraction to prevent the outcome in respect of staving off the disengagement. In hindsight, perhaps the pandemic changed the trajectory of our relationship. It shone a light on the differences in our working lives. We'd always taken an opposite approach to work. Writing is part of who I am. I'm highly driven and constantly chasing the next project. For him, work wasn't as significant to his identity. Instead, his fulfillment came from extracurricular activities such as tennis and cycling. Notice that once again a victim is going down the wrong path with regard to thinking that is what has caused the demise of the relationship. In 2020, as the deputy health editor of the Mail on Sunday, my specialist subject was suddenly of the moment. My days were busier, longer and more absorbing than ever, and as an essential worker, I was able to work from my office for most of lockdown. He worked in digital media and was increasingly disengaged from his job. While I was excited about my reports being part of living history, his lack of passion for his job was something I struggled to relate to. Or rather, the fact that she was focused on her work amounted to a threat to his control because she was focused on the work rather than him. And as a narcissist, that cannot happen. Shortly before the breakup, he got a new job. He was upset I hadn't given his promotion enough attention, threat to control. In hindsight, he was probably right. What's more, our wedding was postponed 3 times during the pandemic. For 18 months, our conversations had been hijacked by colour schemes, stag do's, table plans and playlists. If we didn't have our upcoming nuptials to discuss, would we have had anything to talk about at all? In May this year, 7 months after the initial breakup, I decided to come out of the divorce closet on Instagram and was inundated with messages from strangers who felt similarly blindsided. Friends of friends got in touch to tell me a single thing had happened to a cousin, a friend or an aunt. All had been married for a year or 2, but together for far longer. In every story, it was the man who had pulled the plug. Overall, women are more than 20% more likely to file for divorce than men, but it's generally a softer landing, experts say. Women tend to mull over it for a long time and their partner will have a sense of what's to come. Maybe they'll suggest therapy or try to discuss problems, says Davis. But with men, it tends to be much more sudden. Women in similar positions told me their partner was so guilt-ridden he gave them everything they wanted financially. But not in my case. The night my husband floated the breakup, I suggested he leave the house to give me space. His reaction was out of character. He refused. Nullification of threat to control. "I've got nowhere to go," he said. "You can't just kick me out on the street." He thought I should leave instead and stay with my mother, who lived a 15-minute drive away. Or he said we could both stay in our share home but keep out of each other's way. Typical response of a narcissist, so that he can maintain control over her while still not being in the relationship. "No, thank you," I told him. After packing just one night in a hotel, he returned to our home and didn't leave, so I packed a case and, aged 31, moved into my mother's flat. Nor did his out-of-character behaviour end there. A month later, when we put our house on the market, we discussed the split of the sale proceeds. When we bought the house 18 months before, my widowed mother had raided her savings to gift us a significant amount, so after the breakup I assumed that if the house sold at a profit, my mum's investment would go back to her. I was wrong. As with many couples, my husband took care of the lion's share of our finances, control through finances. I transferred him money for bills, the mortgage payments and household expenses, and he took care of it. The same applied when we bought our house. My mother's money went into his bank account. It meant that when we split, he claimed that the money wasn't invested in the house after all, but spent on council tax bills and bathroom renovations, asset appropriation. There was nothing I could do to contest it. Somehow he'd worked out that only a quarter of my mother's money was left. A few weeks later, he asked for the engagement ring back. Sense of entitlement, triangulation with object. It was around this time I realised how naive I was about marriage. The moment you legally commit yourself to another person, all assets, savings, pensions, house are 50-50. And if it all goes wrong, there's little you can do to win back what you put in. You could ask a solicitor to help, but they charge an average of £200 an hour, and it is unlikely to go your way. As for rings, they count as a gift, and there is no legal imperative to give them back, so I kept it. In June, I returned to the house to pack my former life into cardboard boxes while my ex was out. I explored the empty rooms, remembering when we chose paint colours together, and taught our small dog to get in and out of the cat flap. He has a new home with my ex's parents. Ever-presence. I remember the first time we walked in and instantly agreed it was the place we would raise our children. I thought of the plans we had to grow tomatoes in the garden, to convert the loft into my home office. But then I crashed back down to earth. On the kitchen counter was an array of gifts he had bought me for various birthdays, with post-it notes beside them to tell me which of them he was taking with him. Sense of entitlement, lack of boundary recognition, asset appropriation. I sobbed, packed my stuff as quickly as I could, and left. The next and final time I returned to the house, I left him a letter on his pillow. He'd broken my heart, but I still cared for him deeply, and I wanted him to know I couldn't bear that our ending was acrimonious. I never got a response. Nullification of threat to control, by staying in a position of withdrawal, silent treatment, lack of emotional empathy. In the days immediately after the breakup, one thought haunted me. How am I going to cope alone? I'd gone from living at home to living with him aged 23. I'd never navigated bills, rent or the mortgage. I imagined I'd been capable without him. In fact, I spent the past 8 months proving myself wrong. In October, I moved to New York City to head up the Daily Mail's American health and wellness content and get a fresh start. I'm not nervous about starting again in a new place all alone. At this point, I am pretty confident I can get through anything. A few weeks ago, he emailed me with his new address so I could add it to our consent order, a form which protects you from a partner coming after you for money in the future. He lives in a one-bedroom flat in a part of East London he'd never expressed an interest in, where as far as I know he has no friends or family. After a bit of digging, I found the flat on Rightmove and stared at the screen, sobbing. Despite everything, all I could think was, I really hope he's not lonely. A real-life instance of where the narcissist gets rid of somebody shortly after marriage and how that victim doesn't realise that it's a narcissist at work and puts it down to other factors instead. It also shows the continuing impact that the behaviour of the narcissist has upon the victim and how she's keeping matters alive, for instance, by looking out for where his property is rather than implementing a no-contact regime. An interesting example, and one that demonstrates another facet through real-life examples of the narcissistic dynamic. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.